industry like there is now. Now there are way more indie companies that are smaller than there are AAA companies out there. At the time, that wasn't really the case. Most of the small companies ended up being AAA companies. So, when I guess there are some big differences though that I noticed when I was working in AAA versus indie stuff, and I think starting off with just the sheer team size, everybody kind of knows that in a AAA project you're going to have a relatively large team. It's going to be quite a bit bigger than an indie team. In fact, in my experience, it's like 5 to 10 times larger on a AAA project. And that's because there's a lot of funding and a lot of pressure to do something big and on a very specific timeline with marketing goals and all this other stuff in mind. So everybody scales up really fast, and then the teams are just giant. What that means as a programmer, though, is that your tasks end up being very specific. So I did all my AAA development just as a programmer. I actually wanted to be a game designer when I started out, but found out that programming was, well, it paid better. It was a little bit more interesting, and I was pretty good at it. So that's kind of where I stumbled into it. But when you're working on programming in a AAA company, you tend to be very specialized. You tend to have very specialized roles for what you're doing. I've mentioned this before that when I started off, I was actually doing tools development, and I started literally doing solely tools development. In an indie company, you're not really going to find that. You're not going to find anybody who's generally just doing tools. You'll probably find people who specialize a bit in tools, and maybe 1 or 2 people work on the tools, but they're also working heavily on the game code and the server code or whatever you have for your type of game, generally whatever your gameplay stuff is. And you don't end up with quite as much silo